This First Christian Church, Meadville, Pennsylvania, 1941. Now, it's a pretty sorry looking bunch of people, to be honest with you. And you look at this picture, you say, what kind of influence could these people have on anybody? But before you trace this church, I want to tell you about some of the people in this church. On the front row are my mother and father. They're holding my older sister, Roseanne. Grew up to be a great Bible teacher. She was single all her life, but that's one of 6 children that my parents had. If you can see this picture very clearly, you'll notice that my mother and dad are the only people in the entire picture smiling. Somebody told me it's because they haven't had me yet. I love my dad because my dad grew up, he was the 17th of 18 kids. His mother dies when he's 3 years old. His father's an alcoholic, coal miner, womanizer. He grew up in a terrible non-Christian home. He's tossed about from older sister to older sister. At age 19, he meets my mother, who's a Christian. He gives his life to the Lord and never looks back. He breaks the cycle. He goes to work, takes a job at the Talon Zipper Factory in Meadville, Pennsylvania, works there for almost 40 years, scraping to get by with 6 kids, but 10% of every paycheck goes to the Lord. When I'm in the 7th grade, my parents helped to start a new church in a little town 15 miles from Meadville. We started with 35 people. And my dad was devoted to this church. First one there, last one to leave. He loved this church. But we had a preacher early on who skipped town, leaving a lot of unpaid bills. And my dad is really concerned, our church is going to have a bad reputation in the community with the preacher not paying his bills. So he goes to the bank, he borrows $2,500 on his own signature. He pays off all the preacher's bills, and then he takes a second job working at a sawmill to pay it back. When you got a dad like that, you're going straight into ministry whether you want to go or not. So I became a preacher. I've got a brother who's a preacher. I got 2 sisters married to preachers. I have one sister who's a black sheep. She married a deacon. But you got people in your family you're a little ashamed of too. On the back row, D.P. Schaefer, the preacher. D.P. Schaefer's son, Raymond Schaefer, became the 2-term governor of the state of Pennsylvania. Served on President Nixon's cabinet. I show people this picture, they say, what a great church. No, just the average church. Never grew beyond 180 people. They had their problems. In fact, not too long after this picture was taken, they asked the preacher to resign because nothing was happening in the church.
You know, I grew up as a very competitive person. I grew up wanting to be the first, the fastest, the lead scorer, always wanting to win. I know it's hard for people to look at my 5'9" frame today and believe that I played sports in high school, but I did. Actually, I was 6'6" in high school. The church just kind of beat me down with years. No, that's not true, but actually I went to a very small school and I loved to play ball, and I learned a spirit of competition.
You know, my brother and I, from the time we were little, we competed with each other. He was always bigger than for his age. You know, about 8th grade, he passes me up in size, but we were shooting horse in the backyard or playing wiffle ball. Or today we play golf together and we're always rooting against each other. To show you how much of a competitor he is, I went to Southeast Christian Church in Louisville, Kentucky, and I stayed for 40 years. He went to Lakeside Christian Church in Northern Kentucky. He stayed for 40 years and 1 month. He wanted to beat me.
When I was playing basketball in high school, it was my goal to be the leading scorer of Crawford County, Pennsylvania. And that was a big deal because the top 10 scorers were published every week in the Meadville, Pennsylvania Tribune. And you don't get any bigger than the Meadville, Pennsylvania Tribune. And my name was at the top 3 of the list every week. But the problem was one of the other top scorers was a guy named Jim Camorra, who was on my team. And we had an excellent basketball team, and we were kind of blowing teams away. And there were times we were 20 points ahead. And I got to confess to you, there were times when Jim Camorra shot the ball that I hoped it wouldn't go in, so I would be the leading scorer. But then we got into the state tournament at the end of the season, and the games were crucial and the games were close. And then when Jim started shooting the ball, I hoped he'd make it. I hoped he would make every shot, because the outcome of the game became more important to me than my individual goals. The team goal became more important than my personal goal.
It's interesting to me that the Bible commands us to love. God commands us to love. It is far more subject to the will. It's more about action than it is about emotion. I'd been married, I think, a year and a half when I went to a Sunday school class party on New Year's Eve here at church. Well, all of a sudden, somebody started counting down, 30, 29, 28, and a bunch of the henpecked guys where I was got up and walked over and stood by their wives and kissed their wives, Happy New Year. And I thought to myself, that is the sorriest display of public affection that I can imagine. I'm so glad my wife and I have a secure relationship and I don't have to go through that kind of phony display. About an hour later on the way home, Judy was real quiet. I said, what's wrong? Nothing wrong. I said, something's wrong. Well, when the clock struck midnight, all the other guys got up and kissed their wives Happy New Year, and you sat there like a bump on a log. I said, Judy, you know that I love you. I didn't think I had to put on that kind of phony display. I'll show you tonight when we get home I love you. She said, I know that you love me. I want other people to know that you love me. I didn't fully understand that, but next New Year's Eve, 29, 20, I get up among the henpecks, I go kiss her Happy New Year. It's a happier New Year. Husbands, love your wives as Christ loved the church. Be sensitive to her needs and nurture them. Several months after that, we were serving pizza in the kitchen of the church to teenagers. And I looked across at Judy, who was serving the pizza, and she looked really attractive to me that night, and I winked at her. She looked away like she was embarrassed. An hour and a half later, I'm sitting in my easy chair, and she came up behind me and put her arms around my neck and kissed me in the back of the neck. She said, you know what that does to me when you wink at me in public? I said, no, but I found out and I'm gonna do it again. My wife, she's really good at encouraging me. One day I got a card that says, I love you because you're the greatest preacher of all time. Now you think about that for a minute. Billy Graham, Martin Luther, John the Baptist, greatest preacher of all time. Now I know that's not true, and I know she doesn't believe. I like for her to pretend that it is, though. I'll tell you what, let's have everybody in the audience who has been married for 50 years or more. If you're together and you're 50 years or more, would you stand right now? I'm gonna see who you are. That always, thank you. That always elicits applause because we respect that. But you go to any one of these couples after service today and ask them, how did you stay together? They will never say it was one big honeymoon for 50 years. No, they're going to talk to you about commitment and forgiveness and sticking it through regardless of feelings. And one of the things, being married 50 years, you know there's somebody at home to whom you are the most important person in the world. I know hundreds of people, only one to whom I'm the most important.
When I was in Bible college, I was preaching at a church of about 70 people on the weekend. When I graduated, I said to the elders of this church, I said, I don't want to be a bivocational preacher. Would you consider hiring me full-time? Well, they'd been a weekend church for 100 years. Well, they had a 2-hour elders meeting, and finally they decided if I would come full-time, they would up my salary from $50 to $70. That was worth $20 more. But it was an ideal place to begin. When I came to Southeast, it was actually 4 years old when I came, and it was meeting in the basement of a house. One of the great things about this church before I came is that they had a very solid core of elders. These guys got along, they were very capable leaders, and in fact, they realized they had great potential. And they went to the president of our Bible college in Cincinnati and they said, we're going to hire a younger man and we're going to make him successful. And you know, I can look back at gentle ways in which they protected me or they guided me early on. And they really lifted, like Aaron and Hur lifting up the arms of Moses. That's what those early leaders did for me.
I remember in the early years of my ministry, our church was listed as the 6th fastest growing church in America, according to some religious magazine. Now, when I read that in the magazine, I got a real ego boost for about 10 minutes. Then you know what I started thinking? Who are those other 5? Are they telling the truth? Can we beat them next year? You see, if you got to be the lead dog, you're always going to be discontented because there's always somebody who's larger. There's somebody who sells more books. There's some preacher out there who gets invited to a bigger convention or gets more than a response from you than you do. And so you need to understand, enough is never enough. Slowly in ministry, I got to the place where I wasn't in competition with anybody anymore. I can't point to a dramatic moment when I said, okay, this cured me of competitiveness. But over a period of time, I did reach the point where my sense of satisfaction, the abundance of my life, was no longer fulfilled by how many people were sitting in the pew or what the offering was on Sunday. And I never lost my zeal for evangelism. I never lost my love for the church. But I did reach the point where I could say with Paul, I've learned to be content whatever the circumstances. The people who really matter to you don't really care about the size of your church. They just care about a relationship with you. My grandkids could care less today whether I preached in a church of 18,000 or 18. They want to know, will I go downstairs and play the Wii with them? Will I go outside and play ball with them? Will I go to their ball game? You know, Isaiah asked, why do you spend your money for that which is not bread? Why do you labor for that which doesn't satisfy? And I would ask preachers, why are you working so hard to impress people who maybe don't really care that much, when the people who really matter to you want you to be joyful and content where you are?
Father, you are the only one who knows all the sacrifices that this family has made. Judy has shared her husband. Phil and Rusty saw a godly father, but they also shared a godly father. And I'm thankful that Bob always made his family a higher priority than the family that you blessed him with here at Southeast. And I thank you for that example. But I thank this family for their example and the way they unselfishly shared. And Father, you have given many good gifts to this man, and I ask for a few more gifts for him. I ask for the gift of peace. I ask that you give him the gift of fulfillment. Help him to have a real sense of accomplishment and fulfillment over how you have used him in the past and how you will use him in the future. Help him to really enjoy that and to have that sense that he has walked in your will. And until that day when he gets the eternal victory of hearing you say, well done, good and faithful servant, keep stacking the victories up for him.